So let's get our program started. Up first, it is my pleasure to introduce Prejean McGrady. Many of you are probably familiar with her name and her voice. She began hosting a radio show in March on the Catholic channel series on Sirius XM, The Katie McGrady Show. Prior to that, she's worked in youth ministry and education. She's spoken at many youth conferences around the country. She's an award-winning author, having published several books. She writes regularly for publications like Blessed is She, the Catholic News Service, Ave Maria Press. She is married to Tommy, and she's the proud and loving mom of Rose and Claire. She's joining us all the way from Louisiana to talk to us about how we are all holy and beloved. So please join me in welcoming Prejean McGrady.
Good morning. Sorry, I just asked him to blow the candles out, just because I don't want anything going viral. You know how the internet can be with women in sanctuaries. This is good, it's good. It doesn't have to, oh, it does tighten. It's fine. I do my radio show every day in sweatpants from the corner office of my house, so like this is a big step up than what I'm used to. There's actually people I can see. I used to get in trouble for talking when I was in school, so now that I get paid to talk, it's kind of like my revenge and Jesus laughing at, see, like there was a reason I gave you the gift of gab. My parents would literally just go tell me to talk. We had a stuffed bear, this giant white stuffed bear, and if I had a million questions, my mom would say, just go talk to the bear. Not that she didn't want to talk to me, it was just, I was a lot. I now have a 4-year-old who does the same thing. We went to her little the parent-teacher conference that they do for pre-K3, just to kind of, tell you if your child's ready for pre-K4. She was. And Miss Mary, her teacher, Miss Mary's last name is Miss Cuccio, which is not a word that you want 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds to say. So it was just Miss Mary. Miss Mary Cuccio and Miss Aber. So we go into the class, and they're telling us, she's great, she's doing well, she listens well, she does her work well, she's learning how to hold a pencil correctly, which is like most of pre-K3 apparently, and how to sit still and listen for longer than 30 seconds. And then she proceeds to tell us the story. At the beginning of the school year, Rose, learning how to operate with other children, all the kids were tattletales. And I guess it's just a thing that little kids do, like Blaine hit me, or Christian looked at me funny, or Ava copied off my paper. Like they're just little kids learning how to operate in community. And so they had this phrase, big deal or little deal. Big deal or little deal. If it was a big deal, so like somebody hit you, you go talk to the teacher. Little deal, you can figure out how to handle it yourself, right? Like teach these kids some independence. And it was kind of hard for Rose to understand the concept because she is a child filled with a sense of justice. Like if she's the kid that will fight with people on the internet someday. Like somebody's wrong, they need to know that they are wrong. So we were working with her at home on this. And so Miss Mary's telling us that they figured out the best way to handle this with all of the kids. They had this little turtle in the corner of their classroom called Tommy the Turtle. My husband's name is Tommy, so I'm sure this is why Rose was very attracted to this turtle, where she would 10 times a day go talk to Tommy the Turtle about all of her grievances with her classmates. And Miss Mary was telling us her favorite moment in the whole school year with Rose was when Rose walked up to Tommy the Turtle to let him know that it was time for them to go pray the rosary. And she grabbed Tommy off the shelf and like snuck him out to the church to bring him with them to go pray the rosary. She was, again, sense of justice. He has to be included. Like he knows all of our woes. This is like 3-year-old confessional. He deserves to come to the church with us. So I definitely the Lord has shined brightly upon me with my children, and I have gotten what I deserved because I was such a chatterbox as a child. And again, now I get to do this. I'm so grateful that we get to spend this day together. I pretty much say yes to any opportunity to come to the Baltimore, D.C. area because my younger sister Laura is in D.C. So she took a train yesterday and met me at the Baltimore airport. We got to have dinner last night. We get to hang out together. Hotels are really lonely places, but then you get to have a sleepover with your sister, and it's just like, you're back to being 15-year-old girls and gabbing. We actually never did that, but this was great. Like, it was great to get to spend time together and that she's here. So I was so excited to get the invitation to get to be with all of you. Normally, my audience for women events is much younger. That's not an attack on your age by any means. But normally I'm at youth conferences with teenagers. But I really honestly think the message can be the same, because at the root of it, and I deeply believe this, and not just because I'm a hashtag girl mom, as they would say, but we're all just little girls looking to be loved. Twirling around saying, "Daddy, Daddy, look at me." Wanting to spend that one-on-one time with mom that just totally fills our hearts. Looking for acceptance and affirmation from the people that we're around, sometimes trying to one-up one another without even realizing that we're ultimately just tearing each other down. We're all, whether 65 or 85 or 25 or 4.5 in pre-K 4 at St. Margaret's in Lake Charles, Louisiana, we're all really coming from the same place of looking for something. And I truly believe that the biggest struggle that women face today, and we're not just going to talk about the struggles, we'll talk about the good stuff too, but I truly think that the biggest struggle that women of every ilk and of every background and of every race, religion, creed, and every vocation, that the struggle that all women face, no matter where you fall on the spectrum, we're facing a challenge to find space, to find a place where we feel like we belong, where we feel like we're accepted, where we feel like we have room to be our most authentic self and to share our gifts and our talents, to know that we are heard, to know that we are valued, to know that we are beloved and have room to grow to be holy. And our world will tell us, well, the space that you're looking for can be found here, can be found there, can be found doing this, can be found rejecting that, can be found making this particular choice or that particular choice. And the world so frequently tries to distract us from that space that we know is actually found in the arms of the loving Father. That we can find spaces and places, usually of our own creation or that we're invited into, but that we can only really thrive in those spaces and places when we first have begun knowing who we are and whose we are in the eyes of the Creator. And that's what I'm going to kind of dig into. And you should know my background is not as any sort of theologian or scholar. I'm not necessarily qualified from the perspective that Sister Madeline taught. I'm so sorry, I got your name wrong. I apologize. There's so many Sister Marys in my life and so many Sister Miriams. I should just stick with the sister moniker, because I know I get that right. So we'll get that theological and philosophical perspective in a little while. And I think what we're going to do across the course of the day is unpack together how we find that space, how we find ourselves held in the arms of the loving Father, which can truly transform the world. I mean, Bishop said it earlier, that our holiness is not for ourselves. It's not this secret, private little thing. It's personal, for sure. It's a sacred thing that we are working on, but that then affects and changes the world around us. And sometimes in ways that we don't even realize until much, much later in life, or in a random moment when somebody says something to us and we realize, wait, that actually had some sort of effect on you? Or in moments where we're actually reflective, which we don't take enough time to do as women because we're busy. And we think back to a particular moment. Does this ever happen to you? Like you have a flashback to like a moment when you were a teenager and you feel terrible at something you did? Or something you said. Like, I relive this moment in 7th grade all the time where I was really mean to this kid named Devin in the lunch line. Like, I frequently go back to how horrible I was in that moment because these other girls that I was standing in line with, the popular girls, they were picking on him. And so I just, like, jumped in with them because I wanted them to like me. And that day I got to sit with them at the lunch table, but not the next day because I wasn't mean the next day. And I go back to that moment all the time about how I went along to get along and said this really mean thing to this really nice kid who was brand new at our school and was just looking for friends, and we made fun of him. And I made fun of him because I wanted those girls to think I was cool. And rather than stand in the awareness of who I am and whose I am, I just tried to go along with what was popular, go along with what the culture that I was surrounded by told me I should do. And we do this so frequently, and then we go back and we relive those moments, and we beat ourselves up, and we think that we're horrible human beings, and how could God ever love us, and how does anybody ever call me friend, and I'm the worst person ever, and if I don't make it to heaven, it's because I was mean to Devin Miguez in the 7th grade on a Tuesday, because this girl named Bailey told me to be. Like we relive these moments. And we do it to ourselves. It's not like God is doing that to us. Like, yes, I guess God has a file folder that he'll search through those things, but I'm pretty sure he's not going to like flash up a picture and say, this is what didn't get you in. But yet I do that to myself. Why? Why do we relive those painful moments? Why do we think that we're not worthy of the mercy that God tells us frequently he is ready to give us? Why do we run and hide in shame from the Father who just wants to greet us? So this summer, we took a big family road trip. We bought a minivan in May, and so we put 7,000 miles on it in the first 4 months that we owned it because, you know, that's what you do with a minivan, right? It's a hybrid. It's like the greatest vehicle in the history of the world. I always said I wasn't going to buy a minivan, and then I test drove one, and I fell in love with it, and I said, this is the only thing I want in life, and I will go buy it right now. It's named Meredith because we're big Office fans, and Meredith had a van, so we have a van named Meredith. And we loaded the girls up, and we took a road trip to Pennsylvania. My husband's from Scranton. That's really why we love The Office, because he's from Scranton. So it's a justified love. I also think the show is about the good, the true, and the beautiful. If you are an Office fan, come talk to me later, and I'll give you my whole philosophical unpacking of the show. So we take this road trip up to Pennsylvania, and I did not realize that most of road trips with 2 small children was going to be stopping and looking for clean bathrooms. Like, that was the majority of the road trip. Like, we would play white noise to try to get the girls to nap, and Rose has this little Amazon tablet that we downloaded shows to, and Claire wasn't even 1 yet. Thank God she learned how to hold a bottle on that trip so she could actually take her bottles in the back seat by herself without losing her mind. But like every 2 hours, we're stopping to find a bathroom. And it was still like kind of COVID, so some places weren't open. We went through an entire section of Virginia that there were no gas stations and no fast food restaurants that had places where we could go to the potty. And that's a hard thing when you've got a 4-year-old who really, almost 4 at the time, like really needs to go potty. So it was starting to get really, really challenging. Well, we found this gas station right at the edge of Virginia. We're in the last 6 hours of our trip. And I go in, and I asked the guy behind the counter, do you have restrooms that are open? And he said, the women's restroom is clogged, you can use the men's. And I looked down at my, squirming, dancing 3.5-year-old, and I'm like, we're gonna have to do it. Like, I'm not taking her to the woods, and we now travel with a little kiddie potty in the back, just in case, but we didn't do that on this road trip, because nobody told me that that was a good idea. The internet, informed me of a lot of things, but not this. So I tell the guy, sure, he hands me the key, we go off to the bathroom, and you would have thought we'd landed on Mars. Like, Rose was looking around, like, this is amazing. There was a urinal on the wall, she'd never seen one of those, so that led to some conversations that I was not prepared to have. We just need to get to the end of this road trip, and my daughter's asking me all sorts of questions about how people go to the bathroom. Thank you. And so we leave, we go very quickly. I'm like, hands up, don't touch anything, just go potty and we're gonna get out of here. Squirt her with Germ-X as we're getting back into the van. And we take off, and Tommy and I are like, okay, we're probably gonna have to stop at least one more time. Like, let's try to find a Chick-fil-A. Like, those are generally pretty clean. Like, fingers crossed, one of them's open somewhere. And we're on the road trip, we're going, and like 30 minutes later, Rose rips her headphones off her head. She goes, Dad, I forgot to tell you, I got to see the inside of a boy's potty. Tommy looks over at me, and I just kind of sheepishly shrug. I was like, the girls' restroom was out of order. And he said, well, yeah, I figured that'd be the first thing you told me when we got back in the car. So I'm trying to remember, forget the trauma of this as quickly as possible. And he said, well, that's good, Rose. Did you go potty? Uh-huh. Daddy, I can go in a boy's potty, but you can't go in a girl's potty. And he went, you are correct, Rose. I cannot go in a girl's restroom. Let's end this conversation as quickly as possible. Go back to watching Primetime Town. We just need to get through the rest of this trip. And so she puts her headphones back on. We kind of forget about this. And I'm staring at my phone, and Tommy's driving, and Claire's finally fallen asleep. So we're making pretty good time. Another 30 minutes pass. She rips her headphones off again, and she goes, Mom, why do we have potties for boys and potties for girls? This is, again, Jesus, why are we having, I'm praying in this moment, why are we having these conversations right now? And I said, because boys and girls are different. And she said, well, what makes a girl a girl? And I'm like, these are conversations that you know you're going to have with your child someday, but I was not prepared to have them in the front of my minivan on this road trip. And so I said, well, boys and girls are different, and there's lots of ways that we're different. What do you think makes a girl a girl? Like, flip it around. Like, let's do Socratic dialogue with my 3-year-old. And maybe she'll get bored of the conversation, and she'll go back to watching the videos that we've downloaded for her, and we can all just sit in quiet and peace. And she said, well, girls can be mommies and astronauts and doctors and bread bakers. I said, yes, they can be. She said, and girls go to clean bathrooms and boys go to dirty bathrooms. I said, generally that is the case. But let's go back to that first part. Girls can be mommies and astronauts and doctors and bread bakers. Like, I've never sat down and told her, like, these are all the things that girls can be when they grow up. Nobody in our family, by the way, is a doctor, an astronaut. I bake bread, kind of, but like not, like she didn't even list off the jobs that we have in our family. But she has this little 4-year-old worldview that a girl, a woman, can be anything, can do anything, can go anywhere, including a boy's bathroom. There's no limit to her 4-year-old vision of femininity. And I don't know at what age that view of femininity and womanhood is going to start to shrink and get boxed in like so many of us have probably done over the years. I don't know at what point she'll start to feel some of that shame and guilt that women begin to carry as they get older, to where they think back to those moments with 7th grade and the mean girl and Devin. I don't know at what point she'll ever have the conversation where she's told, you can't, which is something that women hear more frequently than not, it seems. Or she's told, you can, but, and she's given this gigantic asterisk that tells her she can only pursue this particular thing if she gives up that particular thing, usually motherhood being the thing that they're told, you can't have this if you want to be successful at X, Y, and Z. I don't know at what point that's going to happen, but I'm trying my hardest to keep it from happening for as long as I possibly can. Because in her mind, there's no limit. In her mind, there's no ceiling. In her mind, a woman, and she's exposed to women who have done incredible things. Her favorite human being on planet Earth is Sister Miriam Ruth, who gets her out of the car every morning when we pull up to drop her off at school. And it's like the perfect Jesus moment, because Sister Miriam Ruth knew my little sister before she was Sister Miriam. So there's just like this familial connection of, Wawa says hi when we hop out of the car, and this nun gives her a big hug and she gets to bring her into school. Like, in Rose's head, nuns, Jesus mommies, are the greatest human beings on planet Earth. That's what she calls them. She calls them Jesus mommies. And we'll walk up to a sister, no hesitation, and ask, what's under your habit? Like, frequently wants to know, how short is your hair, or how long is your hair? Like, she's got lots of questions. I was told by Sister Miriam Ruth the other day that all Rose did was like point and shrug, and she's curious. Maybe she has a religious vocation. I'm going to foster it as much as I can. But the thing is, in her little 4-year-old feminine world, she has the most innocent and expansive view of the woman's heart. And our world, as we grow up, tries to crush that authentic feminine heart and put us in boxes and limit the spaces that we are called to go to in a unique feminine way. And as long as I possibly can try to protect that, we will. But it makes me wonder, well, how can I maybe build it back up for myself? Or try to build it back up for other people, or defend it for others who maybe haven't ever drifted to the places and spaces where they think there's some limited view of femininity. How can we actually authentically define it to where we understand what it is in the most expansive way imaginable, but also recognizing the particular uniqueness and beauty of the feminine heart, of I'll use the Catholic buzzword, the feminine genius, that we possess in a unique way. That we can be the mommies and the astronauts and the doctors and the bread bakers and the sisters. We can be women in this world who are desperate for an authentic witness of femininity that knows it's not limited, but also knows where it belongs and what it's called to do, and only the way that the woman can. If we look at the passage that we've been digging into from the book of Colossians, the letter to the Colossians, the thing I keep getting struck by, and it's the back of the Bible, so my Bible's going to keep closing because the binding is not super broken yet. I have a very worn-out Bible that Rose has co-opted, and so it just gets kept at home, and if it moves from the shelf, she gets mad at me. So I have this newer Bible that I'm still breaking in. But I love the fact that Paul is addressing us as holy and beloved, and then giving us this list of things we're called to do. It's a title that's being conferred upon the Christian. You are holy, and you are beloved. And we live in a world, and we live at a time, and sometimes it even feels like in the life of the church, we're told you're not holy, or you're not holy enough, or you're not holy in the right way. Or you're beloved, but, and there's always a caveat. Or a beloved if you, and there's always some sort of addendum to the belovedness, some sort of limit to the call to holiness. And then in that title that is conferred upon us, you're holy and you're beloved, there's a command. These are the things that you're called to do. You're called to be compassionate. You're called to be humble. You're called to be kind. You're called to be gentle. I mean, he wasn't writing this letter just to women, but I kind of feel like he was writing this letter just to women. Like, I kind of feel he had women in his head when he was thinking about these are things that you as a Christian are uniquely called to do. That the kindness, the gentleness, the humility, the compassionate heart of a woman, the patience of a mother is what gets her to heaven. I mean, our Blessed Mother is without sin because she had to potty train Jesus. I'm convinced of it, and I cannot wait to have the conversation with her about how that went in the first century, right? Like, I just can't wait for it. But that these qualities that he digs into, our compassion, our kindness, our humility, our gentleness, our patience, our mercy, that we are called to do, the world tells us you don't need to do those things. Or you need to limit the way you do those things, or those things will actually prevent you from being successful from this external perspective. And we listen to those voices too frequently. We give them too much weight and too much clout. We have too much noise constantly crammed into our heads and flooding our minds to where we can't hear the still small voice of the one who says to us, you are called to holiness. I see you as beloved. I think that we can restore an understanding of our call to holiness and our understanding of how loved we are and do these things well in the world and not put any sort of cap on it, not put femininity in any sort of box. Be this compassionate, kind, humble, patient woman that we are called to be. When we get back to an understanding of femininity that I think is rooted in 3 identities of the feminine heart. And the first is as daughter. If we understand that we are a daughter of the King Most High, and I know that's a phrase that sounds kind of cheesy. You're a daughter of the King Most High. Like it sounds like something that would be in a song with hand motions, and we teach it at VBS. But a daughter of the creator of the universe, who when he said, let there be light, was intentionally thinking about you sitting in a church filled with light someday. You walking down the hall at 2 o'clock in the morning to go feed a crying baby, turning on a little lamp in the room and a little bit of light. Not too much, because you don't want to wake the baby up too much. Light glowing from your cell phone, illuminating your face as you scroll through Instagram and feel worse about yourself every time you see another picture. Light that illuminates our path, but sometimes it just kind of feels like we want all of the path illuminated immediately so we know precisely where the Lord is bringing us. That the creator of the universe thought of you in the very first moment that he created light. The creator of the universe, I'm convinced God made giraffes because he just wanted to make us laugh at the absurdity of that creature. Have you ever seen a giraffe up close? Over the summer, we got to go to Nashville, and a former youth group student of mine works at the Nashville Zoo, so we got to go behind the scenes and feed the giraffes. They're absurd. Like, looking at a giraffe up close, God sneezed, and out it came. Like, their necks, their tongues, like they've got horns, this weird pattern. Like, you look at them and you think, what were you thinking other than you wanted me to delight in this absurd creature? A daughter knows that she's cared for. A daughter knows that there's somebody there to catch her when she jumps off the edge of the swing set. And dad is there with his arms open. A daughter knows that she can cry out in the middle of the night and mom or dad is there to protect and care for her. A daughter knows that mom and dad come home at the end of the day, that mom and dad will have food on the table, that mom and dad will be there to provide. A daughter knows she's cared for. And if we can get back to our identity as daughter of the Father, then we can recognize that belovedness in a unique way. There's a dependency in our daughterhood. And we live in a world and at a time when everybody's telling us to be independent, that we don't need to rely upon anybody else, that we can do it ourselves. The culture of death screams at us that you have to be able to take care of yourself, which is why you should have this choice that can ruin and end the life of another. We live in a world that tells us don't ever be dependent, don't rely on anybody else, keep your separate bank account, don't ever be so dependent upon another human being that you wouldn't be able to get away if you need to. A dependency would imply weakness in the eyes of the world. As opposed to a recognition that if I recognize I'm dependent upon the Creator, it means that I know that I'm cared for, I'm provided for. It doesn't mean that I'm not able to care for and provide for myself in certain aspects and elements of my life. It's a recognition that I know that in some way my life is not my own. That I'm here not because I just spontaneously appeared, but was created and am cared for, and I'm an intentionally thought about human being made in the image and likeness of the Creator of the universe who thought of me at the very first moment of creation. If we can get back to an understanding of our daughterhood, of our belovedness as cared for by the Father, what would that do in the way that we maybe care for our own sons and daughters, our own friends and coworkers, people that we spend time with at Bible study, or the fellow moms and dads that we see at drop-off in the morning when everybody's trying to hide the fact that they're still wearing their pajama pants? You will never see me get out of the car, because the one time I did, I was still in my pajama pants and had to sheepishly walk over and hand the water bottle to the nun. Sorry, sister. She kind of chuckled, and that's when we had the whole conversation about what's underneath your habit. We operate differently when we know that we are a daughter. When we know that there is a Father who thinks of us, who cares for us, who has plans for us, maybe not always obvious and clear to us, or plans that we would have necessarily chosen for ourselves. But daughters who know that they're loved are then able to turn around and love others. And that second component of the feminine heart is as sister, is in community, in a way that's particularly unique. We had some friends over pre-COVID for a big chili night, because Tommy and I were talking pretty regularly about the fact that it just kind of felt like we didn't have any friends. And that's a weird thing for married couple. Like, you once had like this robust social life, and then you have this tiny 2-year-old that has to go to bed at 7 o'clock, and so you can't go anywhere without getting a babysitter. And then you feel guilty the whole time that you're gone, so you like rush back home even though she's sleeping the whole time. Like, there's just this weird identity shift when you become a parent. And so we would often just talk to each other like, we don't have any friends. Like, I guess we should have friends over. I traveled a lot at that phase of my life. So like most weekends I wasn't home, but there's one precious weekend that we were home and we had some friends over. And this thing just naturally happens where the guys ended up on the back porch smoking cigars and pipes, and the women were inside sitting around in the living room having decaf coffee and tea and visiting. And it like wasn't like we weren't like separating by gender on purpose. It was just like the guys are hanging outside and the women are hanging inside. And after everybody had left, and it was a pretty late night, it was like, okay, yeah, we can host this like once a year. We are way too tired to frequently have people over until 11 o'clock at night. Everybody's like, what were you guys talking about outside? He was like, we're just kind of hanging out. Yeah, what were you talking about? I don't know. Like, he couldn't tell me. He couldn't tell me what they talked about. I'm pretty sure they'd had conversation, but like it wasn't the priority. Like, they were just hanging out. Like, I think they probably talked about what tobacco they were each smoking. Like, that was the extent of the conversation. And he said, well, what did you guys talk about? And I was like, oh man, what didn't we talk about? And I just like went through the laundry list of like, we worked out Allie's boyfriend problems, and we were chatting about Catholic school choices, because there's 4 schools that compete in the diocese, and which one were we all choosing? Like, we went through all these topics about our lives. And I hate people always say that like men's brains are like waffles and women's brains are like spaghetti. And it's like, I don't mind that my brain's like spaghetti. I like spaghetti. It's one of my favorite foods. I find waffles to be really difficult to make, and nobody likes cleaning a waffle iron. Like, I'm fine with the spaghetti brain, but I don't even like necessarily segmenting our masculine and feminine brains in that way. I think it's more that women are drawn to sisterhood and community in a unique way. Our feminine heart beats for other women that we encounter and see and long, and I'll put it the way Bishop put, long to be generous to and to help. To enter into the pain, the suffering, the joy, and the excitement. To help a sister know you're not alone in this. And you're able to enter into the you're not alone, and I can try to help care for you in community with one another, hopefully building one another up, because I know that I'm first cared for and loved and built up, and there's a plan for my life because the Father loves me in a unique and profound way. The daughterhood drives the sisterhood. And this is something I deeply believe is under direct attack in our culture. Women are pitted against one another. They're told to compete with one another. Sometimes you walk into a corporate America boardroom and there's one woman, and so there's a competition of, well, I want to have that seat. Or there's a belief in the church that, well, this woman is more feminine than that woman, so that's the voice that I'm going to listen to because she looks like the right Catholic woman, and that's the kind of Catholic woman I want to be. And then forgetting that I can live my own authentic Catholic femininity without having to compare and constantly compete. Social media doesn't help this. We live in a voyeuristic world where I peek into people's lives and I think I know everything about them because of the highlight reel that they've shared. Sisterhood is under direct attack. The daughterhood element is certainly under direct attack, but everybody thinks, oh, I'm a good friend. I'm a good companion. I have good community. But every single daughter can go back to a moment when she, as sister in the world, was hurt by another, was rejected, was made fun of, was the one rejecting or making fun of, was left out, excluded, was told she wasn't blank enough, and then she deeply started to believe it. I guess it was last spring. COVID timelines are weird in my head. It was definitely, Claire was alive, so it was 2021. I have to do the math in my head. And there's this little park about a mile away from our house that we go to pretty regularly. And so we picked up Chick-fil-A and we went to go have a little family picnic at the park. And we lay out our picnic blanket, and Claire wasn't mobile yet. It was the dream time of like she's aware of things, but she's still. So like she's on the blanket, and I'm actually able to eat my food. And my daughter Rose is she's just like her father. She's incredibly gregarious and extroverted. Like she's never met a stranger. She will tell you her entire life story in 30 seconds. She had to bring 3 things for show and tell at school, like all about Rose. And she brought a ballerina tutu, one of her favorite stuffed animals, and a rosary. And it was, and we like practiced together like her presentation for school. And she like said it all like really, really quickly. This is my ballerina tutu, and this is my stuffed dog, and this is my rosary. That's all the stuff I need. Like she just will walk into the room and own it. And there were these 2 little girls on the playground when we got there that were kind of like playing. There's 2 separate swing sets. They're playing on one, and so Rose went to the other one that's designed for younger kids. And she's playing on that. There was this little boy, I'd put him at like 18 months, maybe 2 years, that she sees over there. So they start playing together, and they're going up and down the slide together, and she's just in hog heaven. She is happy. And the 2 little girls that were on the bigger swing set got off of the swing set and went and sat down on this bench that was like on the outer rim of the playground. And so Rose has been playing with this kid, and she keeps calling him Buddy, and I think it's just because she doesn't know his name, but his name was actually Buddy. So she learned his name. So she and Buddy are playing together, and Buddy's sister was one of those little girls that had gone to sit down on the bench. So Buddy leaves the playground and starts to walk over to his sister. I put these girls at like 4 or 5. Rose was 3. And so Rose walks over there with Buddy, and she goes, "Hi, I'm Rose." And the girls look at her, and they don't say anything. And they go back to what they were doing. They had this little kitty purse filled with play makeup inside of it. And so Rose says it again, like a little louder, and she steps a little closer. She goes, "Hi, I'm Rose." And the 4-year-old and the 5-year-old, because they definitely were not the same age, and their moms were sitting a little further away, so I don't think they saw any of this playing out. They looked at each other, they looked over at Rose, they picked up their stuff, and they walked to a bench a few feet away. And I have never wanted to harm a child in my life. But in that moment, every piece of mama bear just like erupted, and I was ready, and Tommy just like he put his hand out and he went, just wait. Rose's face dropped. Like she knew that these girls had just been mean to her. And she kind of took a step back and she walked over to me and she picked up her drink. She had an apple juice and she sucked on it for a minute. She put it back down, and she looked at me and she said, Mommy, can I bring my friends some French fries? And I wanted to be like, they're not your friends. You cannot share French fries. Like I said, sure, Rose, if you want to bring them French fries, you can. I kind of forgot that we were still kind of in a pandemic, but I said, sure, like you can share the food. And she walked back over there, and as she was getting closer to them, they got up again, and they went further away. And that's, I think, the moment where she realized, like, they don't want to play with me. And so she just turned around, she came back over, she put the French fries down, she went back to the playground, was playing, didn't seem to be too bothered by it. Then she came back a few minutes later, and we could kind of tell like it was bugging her. And so Tommy said, Rose, do you want to go swing on the swing? And she said, with Mommy. And so she and I went over to the swing, and I put her on the swing, and I'm pushing her. And you know, sometimes kids will like just unload, and sometimes you like have to get them to do something else, and they kind of forget that they have a chance to unload. That's why I pump her full of Cheez-Its after school and ask very pointed questions about what happened so I can actually get some information. We recently bought a little Halloween skeleton. We called him Scully. And Scully and Rose sit on the couch and talk about school after school. And like I just listen in on the side. Because she's, you know, she's already turning into that 4-year-old who's like, fine, good, nobody, like the one-word answers. But I'm pushing her on the swing. And I said, how you feeling, Rose? Those girls weren't very nice to me, Mom. No, they weren't. Why? And like at this moment, do you dig into like hurt people? Do you dig into the fact that, and we had noticed it before, like those two little girls were clearly at the park with their parents for visits with their dad because it looked like the parents were divorced and the dads had both left at the same time. And so like those little girls are probably like processing the fact that they just said goodbye to their dads. And like there's all these reasons that it probably happened. Like I'm not trying to turn you into haters of these 4- and 5-year-old girls and like you're all ready to go to Lake Charles and defend Rose's honor. Like there's a reason. Hurt people, right? But I don't know how to dig into that with her just yet. I'm still learning. She's my guinea pig kid. Like I'm going to make all my mistakes with her. And before I even can like start talking about it, she goes, sometimes I guess people just don't want to play. That's okay. I can find new friends. Like immediately bounce back. Like the wisdom of children who have not yet been harmed by all these things in life. I said, yeah, Rose, that's exactly what it is. Sometimes people just don't want to play. Sometimes people just have the friends that they want to play with. And it's the first time, it's not going to be the last. Because we do this. I think women do this in a unique way, not a good way, but in a particular way to where we cut each other down, or we know precisely the thing that can needle and hurt and harm. There's this belief that if I cut somebody else down to the knees, then I'm somehow standing a little taller, forgetting that, well, they're shorter and I'm shorter because I started off from a pretty low place. And sisterhood has to be reclaimed with this vision of building one another up, that a rising tide raises all ships, that the success of one woman is actually a success that I can celebrate, that the life that one woman is leading is a life that I can honor and I can admire, but I don't have to copy. I don't have to emulate it point by point. For the longest time, I felt like I was behind all of my college roommates because they all got married and they all started having babies long before I did. And I'm sitting around like, well, I can't get a date with anybody because slim pickings in the city of Lake Charles. I had to find my husband from Scranton, Pennsylvania on Facebook, right? Like this whole thing. And then we didn't have a kid right away, and now we only have 2, and most of my friends have 5+, and I feel like there's this constant belief of I'm behind. And in the feeling of I'm behind, or I don't have the same Catholic life that she has, or I'm not the same kind of Catholic woman as her, well then she's not living the life that I'm living. I'm not called to be in community with her. I'm not called to be her sister. And in fact, I maybe am called to attack her in some way, shape, or form. That competition that breeds up in my heart. Social media is the worst thing for this. I mentioned that a second ago. There's a way that we can blow it up and yet still keep in touch with our friends from across the country. I guess we should just all exchange phone numbers rather than have to watch each other's lives play out in Instagram stories and feel that resentment that sometimes grows and builds. If I know that I'm loved and I'm a daughter, then hopefully that leads to a reclaiming of the authentic community that we're called to build with our sisters. I think that's why, and it's a working theory, but I think that's why we're seeing a boom in vocations right now among women, is this desire for authentic sisterhood that they never got growing up, or that they saw from a distance when they encountered religious sisters. Every time we bring my daughter to the Religious Sisters of Mercy's convent, the thing that she always talks about afterwards is that they get to have sleepovers with each other. Like it's like they must have a party every night. Like she's convinced it's a party with Jesus, and they're staying up all night in the convent. Like she sees it even at 4, a desire for that authentic sisterhood. If I know I'm a daughter and I'm loved, and that leads me to being able to love my sisters in community better, it also ignites within the heart of every woman, whether biological children or adopted children or not, the motherhood that we are all called to in a unique way. Right? Daughter, sister, mother is the movement of the feminine heart. Motherhood that, sure, sometimes it's raising and rearing children, and sometimes it's being the greatest aunt that the world has ever known, and sometimes it's being the teacher in the classroom of little kids who are desperate for affirmation and attention from an adult because mom and dad are too busy and haven't given it to them. That the motherhood that every single woman is called to exhibit in a unique and particular way. I gave a talk somewhat similar to this to a bunch of high school girls over the summer. And I kept battling with myself, like, how do you talk about motherhood to 13 and 14-year-olds? Like, it's not going to be a biological motherhood for probably a long time for some of them, and maybe not for all of them in the room. How do you talk about motherhood without just telling a bunch of stories about your own kids that have shown you the heart of the mother in a completely different way and have drawn you to a closeness with the Blessed Mother like you never imagined you'd be able to have? But you know what I'm talking about. Every woman does. This caring, this seeing a problem, seeing an issue, seeing a person in need, and that feminine intuition, the feminine genius, and the feminine heart, knowing I can step in this moment and be exactly what St. Paul said we're called to be. I can be compassionate, kind, patient, humbly help in a way that really only a woman could. Rose was born in August of 2017. I'm going to tell you a story about that in just a second. But the first few months of parenthood rocked my world. Like I knew, but I didn't know. Like I didn't know she wasn't going to eat and that she was going to be a failure to thrive. I didn't know that she wasn't going to sleep because she had the worst reflux in the world, and so the doctor wanted to put her on this medication, which meant I had to figure out how to get a syringe in a 7-week-old mouth. I didn't know that the day that she was supposed to have her tongue tie surgery, my husband was going to have to fly back to Pennsylvania to bury his grandmother, so we canceled the surgery, which then of course meant that when we had to do it later on, it was too late, so that she had to start getting bottle fed. Then I felt like a failure because I couldn't breastfeed, and the internet tells you that you should breastfeed your babies, like all of it, right? And I guess she's about 3 months old or so, and Tommy got home from work. My husband's a teacher, so praise the Lord. He gets home at like 4 o'clock. We don't have to watch the clock until 5. And he could just see. He was like, what do you need? I was like, I just need a minute. Like, I just need to leave the house for just a few minutes. It's been really tough today. And he said, great, go do what you got to do. And so, like, my first thought was I'm going to go to Target, but that's, like, on the other side of town. And so I don't have enough time, and I don't have $200 to spend on, the one thing I need to go buy, and I'll walk out of there with the store. So I ran to this little neighborhood Walmart right out around the corner to get a rotisserie chicken for dinner. Like the greatest thing ever invented was the fact that I could walk in, like I can make so many meals from that. So I drive up and I park, and the neighborhood Walmart in our town, it's not in a bad part of town, but it's not a neighborhood Walmart that I go to after a certain hour because of where it is, and there's like a major intersection, and there's some not great neighborhoods behind it. So I was like in like the last hour or so of the day that I would go by myself. And there were already, crowds of people in certain parts of the parking lot that I needed to avoid. So I parked my car and I'm walking up to the front door of the grocery store, and there was a young man standing by the buggies, and I could just immediately tell that something was off. Buggies are carts, by the way, not bugs. I feel like I should clarify. Sorry, that's my Cajun. So This young man is standing there, and I could just tell something's not right. He was stemming. I was a teacher for years. I can spot a young man on the spectrum in a second. And he looked confused, and he looked like he'd been crying, and he was alone. He was just standing there alone. And then as I got a little closer, I realized that he wasn't just like standing next to the buggies. There's a pole, like where you put the carts in it, and he was like there was a bungee cord around his leg, and he was like strapped to the pole. I'm like, what is happening? And everything in me wanted to just walk into the store and just like get my rotisserie chicken and leave. Like I'm a 29-year-old mom of a 3-month-old. Like I cannot get involved in a thing right now. Like I've got 10 minutes of alone time before I got to get back for the screaming baby who doesn't like to eat. But this kid is bungee cord to a pole next to the carts at the neighborhood Walmart. So as I'm getting closer, this other woman across the parking lot sees me walking in and sees that I've seen him, and we make eye contact. Never seen this woman in my life. She's easily 40 or 50 years older than me. But we both see this kid, and we know that something's wrong. And when women see something is wrong, they do something. They step in. It was as if we exchanged an entire thesis of what we were going to do by just looking at each other. And she went over and she stood next to the young man, just a few feet away, but to let him know that she was there. I walked into the store, immediately went to the customer service spot and asked to speak to the manager. The manager came out. I explained what was going on. He looked at me and he said, "You're the third woman to come up to me like the past 10 minutes to tell me that this kid is out there." So and I want to be like, "So why didn't you go out there and take care of it? Like, come on, dude. Like, if 3 women have come to you, like, listen to women. Like, the world has been screaming it for years." So he walks out there with me, and the woman has gotten a little closer to him, and this kid. And as I get all the way up to him, I realize he can't be more than 14 or 15. He has clearly soiled himself. He is weeping into the arms of this woman who's holding him that he's probably never met in his entire life. And so the manager calls one of the local mental health clinics that we have. I was so relieved he didn't call the cops. They unbungee cord the kid. We sit him down. I run inside the store. I ask the guy, he's like, "Do you have it's just a neighborhood Walmart. It's just the grocery store version of Walmart." So I run inside, and I can't find underwear. Like, I can't find any clothes, but I found swimsuits randomly. So I grabbed him a swimsuit, and somebody brought him inside, and he sent him into the bathroom and changed him and sat him back outside. And the mental health clinic came, and they picked him up, and they brought him away. And I have no idea what the rest of the story is. But I know that in the span of like 15 minutes, 5 women saw this kid in distress bungee cord to a pole outside of Walmart and did something. And that's what I mean when I say the motherly heart of a woman. Yes, it means rocking babies and rearing children and teaching kids in CCD class, but it more means an awareness that only comes from the heart of a woman who knows that she is loved and who is in community with other women, who is then able to step out into the world and profoundly and radically help, sometimes in colossally big moments, but oftentimes in small, subtle ways. Yesterday when I landed in Dallas, I'm only traveling once a month now because it's hard on the kids. And I FaceTimed Tommy when we landed because I knew that they were in the drop-off line. And when Daddy brings Rose to school, he lets her stand up and look out the sunroof. I don't let her do that, but it's a daddy drop-off, so it's special. And so I FaceTimed, and she's like showing me all around the parking lot, and I'm showing her all around the plane. And she was getting a little sad when it was time to hang up the phone, and so she started tearing up, so I started tearing up, and I'm like, "Come on, Katie, like, get it together. You're in a mask, you're in glasses, like, you cannot cry right now. Like, you can't snot into your mask on this airplane. It's the only one you have." And so I was first on the plane, so I get up, and I'm standing there, and the flight attendant was in the galley as we're all deplaning, and she saw that I was kind of tearing up, and she just reached out, and she touched my arm, and she said, "I know it's hard, but you're doing a great job." That's the motherly heart. The motherly heart, the sisterly heart, the heart of the daughter that beautifully combines together to being compassionate, kind, humble, gentle, patient, merciful in ways that so often are unseen by the world, and yet the world runs because we are in it, mothering and being sisters, knowing that we are daughters. I've never seen it more clearly than when my daughter was born, and like something changes the second they hand you this alien baby. And you think, I created you, and I just pushed you out of my body, and I now have to keep you alive. And also you look really weird, but hey, it's nice to meet you. Like that whole moment. So Rose was a surprise. We were in FP, so like I can tell you date, time, and place, but like we were not wanting to have a baby for at least a year or more for a variety of reasons. That was what our discernment had led us to. But surprise, Rose joined us, and we were thrilled. We were so excited. And it was not an easy pregnancy. Like miserable. Like never want to do this again. One and done. Like I hate this. Puking all the time. Wasn't excited about, like everybody tells you like, oh, you're glowing. I wasn't glowing. Like I had acne. Like, oh, you seem so happy. I'm stressed because that nursery is not finished. Like all of these things. And then, of course, you arrive at the day. Rose was induced because I was like, get this child out of me. The last thing I can control is the birth date, and this is when it's going to be. So we arrive at midnight. They start me on the Pitocin drip, which is straight from hell. And they, like I got the epidural at 9, thank the Lord. Like it was the most magical nap I've ever had my entire life. But the nurse anesthetist, God love the guy, he came and he topped off my epidural at 2 o'clock. And I was numb from my armpits down. Which is great up until the moment where they tell you, start pushing. This is probably not the talk that our Lord thought I would be giving today, so I'm sorry, Jesus. So 3 o'clock, my OB comes in. He asks me if I'm ready to start pushing. I'm 10 centimeters dilated. It's time to go. I tell him, great. We start pushing. Nothing's happening. 30 minutes later, like nothing has moved. Like this child is not coming out. And a lot of activity starts to happen in the room. Like 2 more nurses come in, and I see the doctor like step back from the table and like say something to somebody else. And at this point, I know what's about to happen. They're about to say, okay, Katie, you have like 20 more minutes, and then we've got to take you for a C-section, because at this point, I've been in labor since midnight, and there's probably some distress happening. But like they don't want to tell you that, because then that just stresses you out. Like the whole process of childbirth is just one big stress ball of emotion. And I look over at my husband, I grip his arm with the strongest grip I've ever had, and I say, you cannot let them take me out of this room. You have one job, and it is to make sure that I do. And not that there's anything wrong with C-sections, but again, I've spent way too much time on the internet. Like I had a vision of how my birth was going to go. And I was not going to include a C-section. And so Tommy just like nods at me, and then like I see him look over at the doctor and like shake his head, and it's like, stop communicating without me. This is my birth and my baby. Praise the Lord, at 4:34, he gave me a little extra time. Out came Rose. 4th degree episiotomy, so that wasn't fun, but out came Rose. And they lay her on my chest, and like you have that moment of like, wow, and also, ew, like you're really wet. And the nurse could tell that, I don't like to be, so she like wiped me off, and like we have this beautiful moment. I'm looking at this little tiny human with a button nose and ears that poke out from the side, and she had a shock of brown hair, and she's like the perfect blend of us, but she also looked just like her dad, which is precisely what I wanted. Like I married him because he's cute, so I want my kids to look like him. Like such a beautiful moment, and we're having this moment as a family, and like it's exactly as idyllic as you want it to be. And then something happened. And I start to feel incredibly faint, and I start to get really, really pale. And like, when you're about to pass out, like you can feel it coming on, and I say out loud, I'm gonna drop her. There was no way I could drop her. Like I'm laying in a hospital bed holding my child, but I had the sensation of falling. Unbeknownst to me, as the epidural was beginning to wear off, my blood pressure was sinking. And so the nurse immediately begins like checking all my vitals, realizes what's happening. So she looks up at Tommy and she goes, Dad, do you want to take the baby? It's the first time Tommy had heard somebody call him Dad. So he like has prepared for this moment. Tommy read far more birth books than I did, like watched all these birthing videos, like knew the importance of skin to skin. I like went in like, just stick me with an epidural, let's do it. So he rips his shirt open, buttons go flying. They hand him Rose. He puts her on his chest, like having his skin to skin moment with this little tiny alien baby. And the nurse lowers my hospital bed flat because she has to put in an IV of fluids because I am losing consciousness very, very quickly. And as the nurse lowers the hospital bed, she did not communicate with the doctor at the other end of the table, who at that particular moment was delivering the placenta. Again, not a word you thought you were going to hear in a church today. But as the placenta is being delivered and the bed is lowered, there's like a clang, and I hear the doctor go, uh-oh, and a splash. And he dropped the placenta, and it was all over the floor. You do not want to hear the words uh-oh and a splash in a delivery room. Just like I said, is there another one? Like I was so confused. at this moment. And at that precise moment, shirtless husband with the newborn gunky baby, placenta all over the floor like something out of a Stephen King novel, the door opens and in walks my mom. And I mean, Tommy has since told me the story that her face would have won an Oscar in that moment, where she walks into the room of shirtless husband, passed out daughter, blood and guts everywhere. And I can hear her voice because it was clear as a bell. She stepped into this room and she sees this, and the first thing she said was, "How can I help, Dr. McAlpine? How can I help?" Now, you should know this about my mother. She is a CPA. She is not qualified in any way, shape, or form to like sew up a woman that's just given birth or to like mop up a like. She was the least qualified woman in the room, and the first words out of her mouth, "How can I help?" Because that is the disposition of the authentic woman. And I think even more so the authentic Catholic woman, who knows she's loved, who knows the value of sisterhood and community, who recognizes the great gift that she can be in moments of chaos and distress, and in moments of great joy and comfort. I think it's the mantra of the authentic Catholic woman, how can I help? And so often the world will tell us you can only help here, at this moment, or in this way. Or so often the world will tell us you don't need to help, like just take care of yourself. Or so frequently, sometimes it even feels like in the church there are places and spaces where I want to help, but it feels like nobody wants me there. And so I feel like I have to edge my way in, but then I feel like I'm maybe being too conceited because somebody thinks that, I somehow think that I'm supposed to be in that place and space, and we battle internally. And I deeply believe that the way to restore authentic Catholic femininity is to start from a place of the Lord has placed me on this earth at this particular moment in particular places and spaces to where I am called to uniquely help as a compassionate, gentle, kind, humble, patient woman in only the way that you and I can. Your life as a woman, my life as a woman, your motherhood, sisterhood, and daughterhood, everybody's looks differently. And if we can live out of an awareness of the unique call that each one of us has to step into chaotic moments and say, how can I help? Then not only will the world be less chaotic and scary and noisy, but the women in the world will be a whole lot happier, holier, and healthier in the helping from a place of an awareness of who I am and whose I am. Rose has a onesie. I bought it at Old Navy when she was like 2 months old, and it was an 18-month size, so I knew she wasn't going to be able to wear it for a really long time. It's so faded now with so many baby food stains on it because I've made both of my kids wear it because I love it. And it's got a little cartoon picture of a globe, and it just says in a little script, "Strong girls make a strong world." And for the longest time, I just kind of was like, yeah, girl power. Like, that's why I loved the onesie. And then in watching these two little girls grow up and contemplating my own daughterhood and sisterhood and motherhood and recognizing the unique place and space that I've been called to at a weird moment, I host a daily radio show on the Catholic channel, and I'm the only female host. So for 5 hours in the morning, you get a guy from Florida, and for 4 hours in the afternoon, you get a guy from Minnesota, and then a priest in New York, but for 2 hours in the afternoon, you get Catholic mom, Prejean McGrady. And I cannot tell you, and this is not me tooting my own horn by any means, but I cannot tell you the emails the channel gets. Grateful that there's a female voice on talk radio in the afternoon. I cannot tell you the conversations I've had with people when they find out that my little sister's a canon lawyer, a female lay canon lawyer, which is like not a thing. And yet she's in that place and space, and they're shocked. Wait, women can do that? I cannot tell you the joy that fills the hearts of moms and dads at our school when we encounter the religious sisters who spend time with us, because they see the authentic femininity being lived in so many different, unique, particular ways. And I've watched what happens when women start to live out of that awareness of daughter, sister, and mother. When they start to use their authentic giftedness in the place and the space that God asks them to step into. When they recognize, I can help. How can I and what can I do in a unique way? The way that your own disposition begins to change, and an awareness of, I don't have to be her. I don't have to try to do that. God's asked me to do this. And to own that in a way that only the Lord can lead you to do. I asked Rose not long ago what she wanted to be when she grew up, because they had to fill out a little get-to-know-you paper for the beginning of pre-K4. And I thought it was going to be what does it mean to be a girl? Mommy, astronaut, doctor, bread baker. And I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she just looked at me and she said, I'm Rose. And she just shrugged her shoulders. I was like, yeah, but what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? And then I realized what I was doing. I was telling her, your worth comes from the job that you have. And that's not the message that I want to send, but then I also, we have to fill out this paper the right way, because I don't want the pre-K4 teacher to send me a note. And she said, I'm me. I just want to be Rose. And so Tom and I look at each other across the table, and I sweat over the pre-K4 homework, because I don't want to get it wrong. And we just kind of shrugged our shoulders, and we're like, yeah, we're just going to put Rose. She's 4. She doesn't need to know what she wants to be when she grows up, because she knows who she is first. And if we can all just get back to that, then I think it would be a lot better. I think we'd be a lot happier. I think the church would maybe be what the Lord wants it to be. You're going to have a lot of time to unpack so much of this today. I know we don't have a formal small group time, but there's round tables in the other room where you can sit down and you can chat. The teacher and me would love to give you 3 questions that you all need to work your way through, but I'm not gonna give you a homework assignment, I promise. But I hope that this has sparked some thoughts in your head and your heart that you want to share with other people. If you took notes, to be able to share those with other folks as well. I'll have a chance to visit with you all a little bit more later. If you want to see pictures of Rose and Claire, you can follow me on Instagram at P. McGrady. They are cuter than cute. Not gonna lie, 99% of my social media is just them. Yesterday, Rose was on the radio with me, and it was the greatest moment ever. I said, Rose, what's your favorite part of church? And she said, when you get to go up to the Eucharist and get a blessing. Totally unprompted. I did not feed her the line, but listening to a 4-year-old say Eucharist, every syllable is pronounced. Eucharist. I mean, it's a very pronounced word. You can go see that on my Facebook page, Prejean McGrady, or download the Sirius XM app, and you can get it on there as well. Y'all have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and we'll get to visit later over there.